Imagine you woke up one morning, grabbed your phone, and instead of seeing news from Washington, London, or Beijing, the headlines came from Lagos, Addis Ababa, and Accra. Apple was headquartered in Nairobi. The World Bank? Based in Kinshasa. The global currency? The Afro, backed by cobalt and cocoa. Sound wild? Well, buckle up, because today we're diving into the question that has haunted historians, inspired dreamers, and occasionally confused your favorite uncle at Sunday lunch. What if Africa was never colonized? No Berlin Conference. No scramble for territory. No random European dudes with maps, compasses, and very little melanin cutting up the continent like a birthday cake they didn't bake. Just Africa. Sovereign. Powerful. Unified in its diversity. With kingdoms, empires, and nations making their own rules from the very beginning. Let's rewind history, not with sadness, but with imagination. And just a sprinkle of comedy because, come on, reality needs a break. Picture this, it's the 1400s. The Portuguese are sailing down the West African coast like it's a cruise. They see the shores of the Kingdom of Benin, expecting to explore. But this time, they're greeted not with tribal confusion, but a diplomatic envoy dressed in fine coral beads saying, "Welcome to Edo. Please fill out this form." And no, we're not interested in Christianity or smallpox today. In this timeline, African civilizations already have their defenses up. The Mali Empire's Timbuktu has satellite campuses in Gao and Kano. University students argue over algebra and astronomy like modern-day Twitter warriors, except in flowing robes and with more respect. Europe, meanwhile, is struggling with the Black Plague and bad teeth. Without colonization, Africa develops on its own terms. Kingdoms expand, merge, compete, and sometimes throw shade at each other like political candidates on Instagram Live. Trade routes stretch from Morocco to Mozambique. And Egypt? Still building things that confuse scientists. By the time the Industrial Revolution hits Europe, Africa's already working on solar panels made from volcanic ash. Okay, maybe not quite solar panels, but let's just say, no one's begging for foreign aid here. Let's fast forward to the 21st century. In this timeline, Africa is not emerging. It emerged in 1650, took a coffee break in 1700, and started dominating global economics by 1800. Instead of Silicon Valley, we have Silicon Savannah in Nairobi. Startups are solving traffic in Lagos with flying motorbikes. Yes, they beep at clouds now. A Ghanaian coder named Kwame builds a social network that replaces TikTok and doesn't harvest your data. The richest man in the world? Not Elon Musk. It's Amina Diallo, a self-made AI genius from Senegal who also happens to be a part-time fashion designer and goat yoga enthusiast. Oh, and she's building a spaceship. In Swahili. Let's flip the question for a second. What would the rest of the world look like without African colonization? Well, spoiler alert, a lot poorer. Europe's Industrial Revolution was turbocharged by African resources: gold, rubber, palm oil, diamonds, humans, yes, humans. If they couldn't plunder the continent, the West would have had to fund its growth the old-fashioned way, by working hard and mining its own rocks. France? Still arguing over baguette prices. Britain? Probably still fighting with France, but without a global empire. The US? Let's just say that without the transatlantic slave trade, the economic foundation of America would look very different. No free labor means fewer plantations. Fewer plantations mean less cotton. Less cotton means Kanye might never exist. Okay, maybe that's not such a bad timeline. Instead of Africa being called developing, Europe might have been the one asking for aid. Imagine European volunteers flying to Ghana to help build roads. Or Italian students applying for scholarships to study engineering in Uganda. Please, Father, I want to go to Ibadan for university. Now let's get serious. What kind of superpowers would we see in this Africa? The Mali Empire becomes the gold capital of the world. Mansa Musa is still the wealthiest man in history, but now with a chain of gold-backed banks across Africa and the Middle East. Ethiopia retains its sovereignty, which it did in real history, too, and leads the Global Orthodox Alliance, while exporting world-class coffee and cutting-edge theology. The Zulu Kingdom, with its fierce military organization, becomes a Pan-African defense powerhouse. Think NATO, but with more spears and better dancing. The Benin Kingdom? A cultural supernova. Its bronze artistry influences global design trends. Every art museum in Europe hosts Benin Weeks, just to stay relevant. And Egypt? It's now an interstellar research hub. The pyramids? Not tombs, my friend. They're observatories, aligned with Mars colonies. African superpowers build diplomatic alliances, not based on which country had the best cannon, but which one made the best jollof rice. Spoiler, Nigeria still wins. Sorry, Ghana. In a non-colonized Africa, Christianity and Islam would still exist, but on more equal footing with traditional African religions. Yoruba spirituality, Vodun, and Akan cosmology flourish alongside Abrahamic faiths, without being demonized. So instead of the missionary and native narrative, we'd have actual interfaith conferences where a Yoruba Babalawo, a Muslim imam from Sokoto, and a Coptic priest from Cairo sit down to talk ethics, not argue supremacy. Traditional spirituality isn't hidden. It's televised. Prime time. Hosted by a charismatic elder named Mama Kechi who starts every session with, "Now listen well, children." African spirituality would influence global wellness trends. Forget yoga and sage sticks. People in New York would be chanting Oriki and buying bottled water from the Osun River to realign their ancestral flow. In this timeline, African universities like Timbuktu, Nsukka, and Makurdi are household names. Ivy League? Nah, we've got the Ebony League. Education is rooted in both science and indigenous wisdom. You don't just learn algebra, you also learn how to interpret moon cycles and speak 3 local dialects before high school. African philosophy becomes part of global curriculum. Ubuntu replaces "I think therefore I am" with "I am because we are." And suddenly the world is a lot less selfish. You know how people in the West say things like, "I went to Bali to find myself." Now they come to Ibadan. And they stay because of the pounded yam. In this alternate timeline, when people say global pop culture, they're not talking about Hollywood. They're talking about Nollywood, but a version of Nollywood that has had centuries of uninterrupted evolution, funding, and storytelling refinement. Instead of superhero franchises based in New York, the world tunes into epic film trilogies set in ancient Ife, with CGI-powered masquerades and multilingual scripts subtitled in Swahili, Hausa, Yoruba, and English. Music? Afrobeats is not a trend. It's the global standard. American rappers collaborate with Zimbabwean Bara masters. Grammy Awards have a dedicated Lagos division. The Super Bowl halftime show? Performed by an Ivorian kora player and a Cameroonian dancer troupe. African fashion, too, sets global runways ablaze. Ankara isn't making a comeback. It never went anywhere. Western designers fly to Bamako and Dakar for inspiration, not Paris. And every major city in the world celebrates. Aso Friday. The world doesn't just consume African culture, they respect its origin, honor its designers, and pay for it fairly. Let's talk business. In a non-colonized Africa, natural resources like gold, cobalt, oil, and lithium remain under African control, not parceled off by colonial powers or sold at unfair rates. Trade is conducted through African-led organizations and unions. The Afro is a leading currency, backed by mineral wealth and a tech-savvy workforce. Instead of being recipients of international loans, African banks are the lenders. African economists shape the policies of the IMF, if it even exists. Tech innovation isn't just happening in Silicon Valley. Cities like Kigali, Accra, and Nairobi are home to world-leading AI labs, green tech startups, and blockchain hubs. Pan-African corporations like Munsa Corp and Nubia Networks dominate the Fortune 100. And when the world faces a pandemic? Africa is not waiting for vaccine donations. Labs in Addis Ababa and Cape Town develop their own treatments and export them globally, at affordable prices. The economic center of gravity shifts, and the rest of the world adapts. Without colonial exploitation of forests, minerals, and human labor, Africa maintains far more of its ecological balance. The Sahara hasn't expanded. The Congo Basin remains intact. Rivers like the Nile and the Niger aren't blocked by foreign megaprojects. African environmental philosophy, where humans live in harmony with the land, guides global conservation policies. Concepts like sacred forests and ancestral water are studied in environmental science programs from Tokyo to Toronto. The continent leads climate negotiations with moral authority, not as a victim of crisis, but as a visionary of sustainable living. Instead of being told how to fight climate change, Africa sets the agenda. And when a global conference is held on food security, it's hosted in Burkina Faso, and delegates leave with bags of organic shea butter, millet, and real climate solutions. Now let's peek into geopolitics. Without the scars of colonial borders, Africa has redefined its map through dialogue, not war. The continent hosts unified economic zones, fluid regional alliances, and a Pan-African parliament that actually works. Global summits like the G7? They're now the A9, the African Nine, leading global diplomacy with a fusion of modern governance and indigenous wisdom. Military bases from other continents? Not here. Instead, Africa has its own peacekeeping coalition, which helps stabilize other parts of the world, from the Arctic to the Middle East. When a conflict breaks out in Europe or Asia, leaders seek African mediation. Why? Because a continent that healed from its own civil wars without colonial trauma leads with empathy, not dominance. Africa becomes not just a global power, but a moral compass. Now let's take a breath. This is a fantasy, a speculative journey. But it's also a mirror. Because when we ask, what if Africa was never colonized? We're really asking, what was stolen? What was hidden? What could have been? But here's the twist, even though colonization happened, Africa is still rising. It's not too late for African nations to shape their future on their own terms. It's not too late for the world to unlearn old narratives and give Africa the respect it deserves, not just for its potential, but for its past, present, and people. And it's certainly not too late for us, as viewers, creators, and thinkers, to amplify the stories that were silenced, and ask questions that lead to deeper understanding. So why did we ask this, what if, in the first place? Because sometimes, to move forward, you need to imagine what was taken. Not just to grieve it, but to reclaim it. Imagining a non-colonized Africa isn't just wishful thinking, it's an act of resistance. A way of saying, we see the greatness. We remember the roots. And we're not waiting for permission to rewrite the narrative. This isn't just history, it's future building. It's Afrovision. It's storytelling as survival and strategy. So next time someone tells you Africa is behind, remind them. It's not behind. It was delayed. And now, the train has left the station. Thank you for journeying with us. If this episode made you rethink, reflect, or even laugh a little, make sure to subscribe, like, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. What other what if should we explore next? What if the Moors still ruled Spain? What if the Benin Empire had reached the Americas first? What if Lagos replaced London as the global financial capital? Tell us. Because this isn't just our channel, it's yours. And we're just getting started. This is Time-Bound Africa, and you've just watched What If Africa Was Never Colonized? See you in the next episode. Stay curious, stay critical, and never stop asking, what if?